She was kind of working on it. And I was like, I really need to keep my sneakers clean because it keeps me from thinking about the reality that everything is meaningless. This idea we build up all of these little devices, right, that kind of keep us centered and distracted from the terror of our own existence, right? Now, that's not the only narrative, right, that describes our experience, right? Our identity in Christ certainly has a lot to say about that, but I think it gets to the core of a human phenomenon, that what we face in this world, a lot of it is we have to face alone. And then we have these moments of connection. But in the depths of our own human experience, right, we can find this notion of nameless dread. Now, think about that idea. I tried to push it on you a little bit so that you can understand what this experience is like. There is no defense against it at the psychotic level. Okay, remember, those defenses are healthy and adaptive, but these individuals, they lack self-definition and are kind of asking themselves this question: do I exist? And the psychological capacity that is deficient is this reflective functioning, this capacity to mentalize. Now, chances are, most of your couples who come to therapy, one of the partners isn't necessarily going to be at this level of development, but they might eventually get there under a certain amount of distress, can regress to a psychotic level where they're asking themselves this question, do I exist? All right, so treatment focuses on this notion of basic safety. The therapeutic tone is usually authoritative, yet egalitarian, and then normalizing the dreadful states. Sort of like what I attempted to do here is that we all experience dread from time to time. We have a number of ways of defending ourselves against this. Maybe another image that would be helpful is think about the newborn and the helplessness of a newborn. They lack any sort of self-definition, right? They haven't been able, they don't define themselves until they've had enough relational exposure over time and developed enough mental capacity to begin to do that. It's very similar in a symbolic way at this level of personality development. So, clinically speaking, you might see someone in enacting this level either in a psychotic rage or a total like decompensation, thumb sucking, rocking in the corner kind of a thing. That they would be in this state due to, again, a number of different circumstances where basic safety has been compromised. Okay, so let me just say a word or two about borderline level of development. This is, as the name indicates, sort of that in between the psychotic or the primitive level of development and a neurotic level of development, where they'll utilize the primitive defenses that I went over, the withdrawal, the projective identification, the primitive idealization and devaluation, but only when they're under significant distress, which makes it difficult then to distinguish between, is this person at the psychotic stage or at a borderline level. When a person, a therapist, someone in context of relationship with individuals at the borderline level might confront the defenses. These individuals have some level of response to the defenses, so they won't lose total touch with reality, even in those states. Identity is inconsistent and discontinuous, but they know that they exist. So the self is relatively defined, but it's inconsistent and oftentimes discontinuous. These individuals will have difficulty with affective tolerance and regulation, can become easily enraged, and are likely to feel shame, envy, or sadness. Their central dilemma is negotiating. Remember, talking about the mind conflict is negotiating closeness and separateness, those developmental tasks. Okay, neurotic level of personality structure. They typically use more mature and defined defenses. Things like repression are my favorite, intellectualization. I think about feeling, right? Or compartmentalization. Problems are typically egocentric, meaning they're usually, they exist in the mind of the individual, and they're a part of the individual's identity. They're not happening to them. With these individuals, it's typically pretty easy to build a therapeutic alliance, and you have kind of the solidification that you're a team and that you've identified the problem that you're working towards. This will make a whole lot more sense to you when you have more patients and you realize, oh, I've been with this person for 6 months and we have no alliance at all. Likelihood, you're working with someone who's at a borderline or psychotic level of development. If the therapeutic alliance doesn't solidify over a normal period of time, it's probably because they lack self-definition. And so you're trying to connect with someone who has all kinds of inconsistencies or discontinuity in their own definition of themselves. So, utilization of some basic interventions include clarification, confrontation, and interpretation. Okay, I've got to move because I've got so much more information, you guys. This is crazy. This should be a whole semester. Just for fun as we transition. Here's a clip from Seinfeld about self-states. I love this.
You have no idea of the magnitude of this thing. If she is allowed to infiltrate this world, then George Costanza, as you know him, ceases to exist. You see, right now, I have relationship George, but there is also independent George. That's the George you know, the George you grew up with. Movie George, coffee shop George, liar George, bawdy George.
I love that George.
Me too, and he's dying, Jerry. If relationship George walks through this door, he will kill independent George. A George divided against itself cannot stand. You're killing independent George. You know that, don't you?
George, I don't even want to get...
You know what Susan used last night? Vault!
So?
She got that from you.
Well, I didn't tell her to say it.
Well, she's the only girl in the whole world. Why can't you find your own girl?
I like her.
You see? You see? See what I'm talking about? It's all just slipping away. And you're letting it happen.
I love it. There you go. Relationship George versus independent George. Okay, hey, there's a bunch of information on the PowerPoint that you'll have access to that goes over the 4 different schools underneath the psychoanalytic umbrella. It's a pretty broad expression of approaches to psychoanalytic thought. Those include ego psychology, self-psychology, maybe the one that, what textbook are you guys using for this class? I probably should have looked. Did they go over specific theoretical orientations? Okay, so
Yeah.
did it go over like object relations therapy? Okay, so yeah, OR is a part of it. So you have information here. You can go back to this on your own. Let's get to the good stuff, right? Conjoint psychodynamic psychotherapy or couples psychodynamic psychotherapy. Let me start with making a few assumptions. And these assumptions are important because psychotherapy is an inherently relational process, right? It's a relational enterprise, and you bring yourself to the encounter. And it's important to start with acknowledging your assumptions. And for me, here are the three sort of guiding assumptions that I make when entering into any sort of conjoint therapeutic endeavor. The first is humans are inherently relational. And sort of the paramount expression of that, I believe, this is my assumption, is found in the marital relationship, where two individuals explore the intimacy of one another. And it's through that connection that not only do we experience intimacy, but we become more fully ourselves. This book here, which has been really influential for me in understanding a relational approach to couples therapy, Ringstrom talks about this idea of self-actualization being really key in healthy conjoint relationships. And it's predicated off this idea that we are hardwired for connection. And it's not only just to experience the intimacy of that connection, but we also find ourselves, more of ourselves, in the context of relationship. It's this idea of intersubjectivity. In fact, well, this may or may not relate to this idea. Did you know that this, I'm free associating here, that 80% of couples problems, are you familiar with this idea? Are brought into the marriage. They weren't created in the marriage. They're brought into the marriage. So it's our crap from back here that we bring into the marriage that create the tension. So there's a lot that's happening unconsciously that's influencing the current dilemma that the couple is experiencing. The second assumption that I make is, and by the way, these aren't my thoughts. These are generated from Dr. Bland's work in the area of psychodynamic psychotherapy, but I certainly have deep resonance with these ideas. I'm making an assumption that of broad gender egalitarianism. While there are distinct biological differences between a man and a woman, that the roles that are prescribed are primarily and maybe even solely social constructs. And because of that idea, I'm approaching the marital engagement in the therapeutic milieu with this appreciation for egalitarianism. All right, so what that means practically is that each partner holds an equal amount of power and culpability. The third assumption is there is an inherent tension. This goes back to this notion of the mind in conflict. There's an inherent tension in all intimate relationships. And when we talk specifically about some treatment interventions in couples therapy, a lot of it will be highlighted by this inherent tension. That we are motivated for self-preservation, right? We enact or embody selfish impulses. It also competes with this desire to uphold and honor and pursue the other. Ringstrom in his work talks about this this as being sort of this capacity to hold the inherent tension